the power of BI in casinos, data management security, and workforce management and analytics. Those are just a few things we're going to cover in today's episode of Transformation Ground Control.
This is Transformation Ground Control, your source for all things business, technology, strategy, and change. If you're growing your business, leading change within your organization, or undertaking any sort of operational or technology change initiative, this podcast is for you. This show covers what you need to know about digital transformation, organizational change, operational improvement, and business growth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting and also your podcast host today. And with you today, or with me today, I should say, is Kyler Cheatham. Kyler, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm with everybody here today.
Yeah, it's a rough start already, but we'll keep rolling, see how it goes here today. But thanks for being here, and thank you to the audience for joining here today. This is episode number 96, and we have new episodes every Wednesday. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as all of the audio podcast platforms that you might be listening to a podcast on. Today, we've got a great show for you today. We're going to get to, later in the show, we're going to have an interview with Gassan Kabara, who's going to be on the show from Kuwait, joining us, talking about business intelligence, data management, and security and digital transformation. So he'll be on the show later. And then we're also going to feature one of our top episodes or one of our top interviews of 2022 so far, which is with John Heyliger, who was on the show several months ago, earlier in 2022, talking about workforce management and analytics within workforce management. So if you're involved in analytics or interested in analytics and or human capital management, that'll be a great conversation that you'll want to listen in on. But before we get to our guests, though, we have a few hot topics here we were going to talk about. Kyler, you had a few hot topics in mind. What have you got in store for us here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a little sprinkle of everything today, but wanted to talk about the gaming industry, specifically in casinos. It's something we've highlighted before, but kind of the use of technology to combat things like cheating or improve customer experience, or even bring the platform to a digital environment through things like virtual sports betting. But I wanted to talk about a recent study, which is actually in Ohio here, that's a state here in the United States, that showcased retail casinos and how they've been using business intelligence and kind of share that in order to stay ahead of a competition and make the most out of their overall business decisions. So obviously the casino industry, especially in specific states here in the United States, is very competitive, and a small advantage can really make a big difference. So there's one piece that they've been using business intelligence around that I kind of wanted to talk through and get your reaction to, Eric. So
Sure.
Tracking high value customers is something they've really targeted. And how they do this is by really digging into the human behavior component of how customers gamble and how casinos can particularly offer them personalized services and bonuses that encourage them to keep coming back and create that overall reciprocal relationship. It also helps on preventing fraud and money laundering by tracking customer behavior, and that can flag that suspicious activity. But it's a really powerful tool in understanding this customer behaves in this way, so that customer is familiar and successful with gambling. Thus, we want to kind of target them with this almost white-gloved approach. So I think it's a really interesting way of bringing human behavior and data together and creating these kind of key data points around how an actual person presents when they're gambling, not only their results, but also to showcase their comfortability, their overall, just behavior, and target those higher value customers, not only on the casino floor, but also in kind of the hotel industry as well. So I wanted to see if that's something you've ever heard of, or utilizing more of those maybe human heuristics and psychology-based data points as opposed to just hard metrics.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that, but I'm not surprised, I suppose, just given that the casino industry is, won and lost based on numbers and data, and they've always been sort of a pioneer within data analytics in terms of understanding who their highest value customers are and flagging them for free stays and free meals and things of that nature, just to really create that loyalty and to create that repeat purchasing behavior, I suppose you'd call it. It's interesting though that it makes you wonder though what happens if they perfect it too much. Do we start creating some society type problems with gambling issues and maybe too much success in analyzing that data and making people too successful at becoming repeat loyal customers that gamble too much of their money away? I don't know. There's I suppose an ethical layer there that I know is probably not the intent of your question, but having said that, I think casinos and sports, there's two areas where they've always been so data driven and so focused on data and perfecting and optimizing the data they have that it doesn't surprise me. That's interesting to hear that they've really starting to or continuing to perfect that art, if you will, and the science.
Yeah, and you wonder kind of who oversees the governance of ethics when it comes to artificial intelligence, and obviously that is a huge question that we, as a global society and technology, are working to answer. Because utilizing human behavior in many different spheres, this is customer facing and revenue based, right? But think about things like a job interview. How do you look at someone's comfortability in talking about the position? Does that make them a better candidate? Those types of different things where it's a very fine line, and to your point, it's very sensitive.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear, in the comments too, in the chat of the
Hmm.
stream, on what people think of that. Is that something that is just good business sense? Is there an ethical dilemma we need to be more concerned about, or what's the situation there from uh, your perspective, especially given the global audience here? I know in many parts of the world, gambling is still illegal and or just not accessible to the local population. So I'd be curious to hear kind of the different perspectives for people that are listening here throughout the world.
Absolutely. And I was just going to do another call to action here, which is more on the light-hearted pop culture side. But anyone that's seen the Ocean's 11 series, where they go in and it has, George Clooney and Brad Pitt, and they go in and they steal essentially from the casino. And there's this one scene in particular where the person on the inside is trying to pass a lie detector so he can work for the casino. And that's kind of data based, heart rate driven, and he actually has a tack in his shoe that he continues to push into his foot, so his heart rate will raise and raise and raise. And this is not at all condoning. You should do that on a lie detector test, just to
Right.
tell you that right now, because that's a Hollywood reference. But if you have seen one of the Ocean's 11 series, I'd be curious to hear in the comments what's your favorite.
Yeah, good. I forgot about that movie. I'm glad you brought that up and kind of brought it all
I
full
love that
circle
movie.
here. Yeah,
Yeah,
great cast.
it's a good movie. Yeah, absolutely. Well, kind of moving on to another kind of new factor in technology legislation, in building off of that ethics conversation. Europe actually recently passed the Interoperable Europe Act, and the goal here is to deliver more efficient public services through improved cooperation between national administrations and data exchange through IT solutions. So the goal here is to make sure that Europeans have the access to an interconnected digital public administration, which will help accelerate digital transformation of Europeans or Europe's public sector. So that's where it's really focused on. And this also has a lot of digital targets that they're looking at for 2030. And then also it saves a lot of costs when it comes to cross-border interoperability through taxpayers' money. So something that we have known in the public sector industry to be a huge pay point, right, in going to all different places as a citizen and trying to get data, records, artifacts, those types of different things. And we also see that in as a main trend that you talk about in 2023 for that interoperability of enterprise systems. Do you think this is something that we'll continue to see as a call to action for the public sector specifically throughout the world?
I don't know if it will or how quickly it might follow suit, or other governments might follow suit, but I think it makes a lot of sense given that the government tends to use so many different systems. When you look at any national or local government, there's just a lot of different systems they're using, and the interoperability is a big challenge. I guess I'd be curious though to know if in Europe or elsewhere or both, if there's a reach beyond the public sector to regulate some of that interoperability, or if that would ever extend into the public sector. Um, on the other hand, just to play devil's advocate, I also wonder if European governments and other government entities should be more focused on just how they're spending and wasting technology money. I mean, that might be in my opinion, it could be an argument to be made for a better place to start. Would be to really clean up the way they're wasting money on some big public sector projects that aren't going well. But I suppose government being what it is its job is to regulate and set standards and that sort of thing. And sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's not. So I'll be curious to see, how it unfolds. But I think it's super interesting. I hadn't heard of this act before or this movement towards interoperability within the government sector.
Absolutely. I mean, I think those are all very valid points, and our Europe-based audience. Why do you think in the comments here that your area might be on the forefront of this public sector interoperability globally? A lot of times, Europe, you can get places a little easier than say here in the U.S., or that public transportation is really proficient and well managed. I know we've talked about on previous episodes even integrating emerging technologies into European-based public transit. So it seems to be kind of on the forefront of that public sector technology implementation. And I just wonder if that's a cultural thing of having embraced technology within your overall day-to-day lifestyle. So definitely a very interesting study, and something that kind of will test the legislation of requiring that. And then the change management efforts of working across borders to ensure that that governance is maintained and you're able to service customers across Europe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, good. Well, speaking of trimming the fat here, we have a recent study or an overall survey from the Forbes Technology Council that I wanted to take you through. And I think it's a great kind of baseline to not only today's episode, but as we go into discussing 2023 strategies and beyond for technology implementation and digital transformation. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of these to you, and I want to dig into a few of them. And of course, if you want to comment on any of the ones that I go through, just feel free to let me know. But the latter ones get more to kind of the technology meat of it. So there's 14 different smart ways to trim the fat of your technology budget here. Number one is identify your most profitable and costly business segments. Number two is delete some data. Number three is optimize your infrastructure's performance. 4 is outsourcing your customer service. And 5 is one I kind of want to stop on and get your feedback on. Number 5 is manage cloud costs through enterprise cloud footprints. And one of the technology council members said that cloud will surpass non-cloud IT spending this year. However, a recent study found that enterprises actually spend 20% more on cloud than expected. Getting full visibility into enterprise cloud footprints enables companies to see and manage cloud costs effectively. What are your thoughts on that? I know you have a lot of thought leadership around the hidden costs of cloud, and so I want to kind of see if you're aligned with that for leaning out that tech budget.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because one of the trends that is maybe unintentional that goes along with the movement toward cloud solutions is the fact that from a technical perspective, it becomes easier to deploy the technology. So a lot of times what you end up seeing is you don't have as much dependency on IT to lead the charge to some sort of technical adoption. So, for example, in the sales space, excuse me, in the Salesforce or the sales automation and CRM space, you have Salesforce, who's really created an entire niche, an entire market of new decision makers in the sales departments of many organizations that in some cases are able to bypass IT, go straight to Salesforce and buy the Salesforce software or some other cloud CRM system. But companies like Salesforce and Workday and NetSuite and others have really created almost a new market or new demand for their product, going straight to the business and really bypassing IT. Not in all organizations. Some big organizations, you still have your your IT governance and your IT decision makers that are going to be critically involved. But the reason I bring this up is I think that in a lot of organization, it creates this dynamic where, including with some of our clients, where you have sort of your central corporate wide digital strategy and roadmap that may or may not involve cloud, but then you have decision makers at the local business unit or local functional level that are making their own decisions to go buy whatever software. And a lot of times without the kind of the global visibility of what's being spent. And so when we go into a lot of our clients, for example, especially our global, more complex clients, the bigger clients, a lot of times they don't even fully understand what systems they do and don't have. So they don't fully understand what they're spending on technology at a consolidated level. So I think it's a great point because I could see organizations wasting a lot of money on either redundant cloud licensees or not getting economies of scale, especially for a bigger company that should be getting better economies of scale because they're making these decentralized decisions around cloud technologies. So I could see that being a real possibility, a real potential cost savings for sure.
Yeah, and definitely having that awareness and understanding when considering the system in the contracting phase. Being like Marcus Harris, you talked about in a previous episode, ensuring that you really do understand the nuances of what it means to actually purchase a subscription-based software, which is really important because there can be a lot of hidden fees layered in there, certainly.
Yeah.
And then number 6 here, I'm curious to hear from both you and the audience on this one because this is something we've never really talked about. This is dump redundant SaaS platforms. So consolidate, duplicate, or underutilized software as a service platforms. And to your point, this specific stakeholder on the Forbes Technology Council, geez, I don't know why that's so hard for me to say, says you're likely using way too many SaaS-based platforms today and can perform the same functions. Find platforms that do more than one critical function and negotiate reduced long-term commitments. Look for vendors that integrate multiple functions into a single platform to cut software maintenance and costs. So this one's kind of interesting because I think it plays into having a core ERP system, but then at the same time, just understanding what that technology audit looks like and being sure that you're not opening the door to a bunch of different disparaging platforms for a cybersecurity risk as well. So interested to hear your thoughts on this, and then also the reaction from our audience in the comments. We'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said, which is the security risk that entails, as well as the cost redundancy and the cost duplication and lack of economies of scale and leverage, things of that nature that you enjoy from having maybe a more consolidated view. So I think it's a great point. I wouldn't necessarily add anything or change anything about what you said there. I think those are good points.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, in the expert witness space and then also in just the overall advisory space, do you often see organizations that may have a lot of SaaS platforms that they weren't even aware of when it comes to when you go in and kind of do that readiness audit?
Yeah, we see it a lot. Like I said, even with the bigger, or especially with the bigger companies and the more multinational, more diverse companies, it's especially common too in companies that have grown through mergers and acquisitions. So, parent company goes out and acquires, companies A, B, and C. They don't fully understand what they're getting technologically with companies A, B, and C. So I think those are big challenges we see pretty often.
Excellent. Well, let's keep going down the list here. At Marcus Harris would like this one. 7, review all your contracts. 8 is don't get emotionally invested in sunk costs. And then 9 is rationalize your application estis. So this one's kind of interesting. Again, it's Paul Dewar from ReadyWorks actually said this on the Forbes Technology Council, and he said, by understanding the relevance of applications to business needs and actual uses, tech leaders can make just strategic decisions about support going forward, including whether to consolidate or remove. This will allow them to both reduce software license costs and resources required to support these applications. So kind of along the same lines of of understanding and auditing your systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then number 10 is don't cut departments that directly impact revenue. Number 11 is revisit your profit loss strategy. And number 12 is a very interesting one. And I'm going to try and say it. It says go fidgetal. And it's PHYGITAL. And
Digital.
stay with
Never
me here
heard it.
because it's, yeah, right. I practiced that word a lot. I'm not sure if I nailed it because I was really nervous to say it. But Kristen Salvia here of Jord talks about how the pandemic has taught us that learning in virtual environments of your business in tandem with personal engagement has serious benefits for your company, its goals and bottom lines. Advancement in augmented reality and reality-based technologies has made it possible to transport events such as fashion shows and retail marketplaces online, extending accessibility for customers and saving time and money. So that's kind of what that word "phygital" means, to actually be physically there, but not really. And we kind of talk about this with the metaverse opportunity and MTFs and all of those different things. Do you feel like this is a main area that could potentially be cost saving when we're talking about looking at lowering technology costs?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it could potentially. I hadn't thought of it. I haven't heard it framed in that way, but it sounds very interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think again, this one has a bit of a balance in my mind, in, having some emphasis on physical human interaction, but then also having that ability to have a different revenue stream, I think is something that's really attractive for companies. And then 13 is start by determining who is critical to the business. And then number 14, the last one here, is tighten the reins on remote employees. So is there any additional ones on that list, Eric, that really stood out to you when it comes to looking at how you can optimize your technology spend and lean out any sort of fat from a tech budget? Anything kind of, any ahas besides the ones I wanted to dig into?
I suppose if you not necessarily in terms of the legacy investments or existing investments in technologies, I suppose the only thing I think of or where my mind goes is what about technologies you might be deploying or about to deploy in the future, and how can you optimize that actual implementation spend? It seems like a lot of these are focused on existing technologies and the cost of the technology itself, but the real cost, as many organizations have found, the real cost of those technologies is in the cost of deploying them, and that's where I think the real low hanging fruit is. So, and given the fact that so many organizations are going through some sort of digital transformation right now, even if it's on a small scale or an isolated scale within their organizations, that's a real big, to me, that potential cost savings and optimization could dwarf, the cost savings that are mentioned here for sure. But those are great starts, especially for legacy technologies that you're going to continue to operate going forward.
Absolutely. Well, definitely a very solid segue into our conversation with Ghassan, who we know has been a CIO, who was on our CIO panel for our Digital Stratosphere EMEA conference as well. And so I'm very excited for you to be able to kind of dig into his insight and knowledge within a long career in digital transformation.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm excited to have him on the show. And I'm starting to pick up on a theme here that we're going to have in the show, which is really centered on data, business intelligence, analytics. I mean, that's sort of a recurring theme that you're going to hear throughout this entire episode, including what you just discussed, Kyler, with casinos and BI, and certainly the interoperability of technologies within Europe, the whole Interoperable European Act. That's BI related. And later in the show, we're going to have John Heyliger from Lockheed Martin, who's going to be on the show talking about workforce analytics or workforce management and analytics. And then, of course, coming up next, we'll have Gassan Kabara, who, as you mentioned, is a former CIO and an advisor to CIOs based out of Kuwait. He's a regular contributor and listener and participant in our live streams and podcasts and just our general content that we put out there. So he's always adding great contributions. So we thought we might as well have him on the show because he's always making great contributions behind the scenes in the chats and whatnot. And he's a very smart guy that we've known for some time. So Ghassan is going to be on the show talking about business intelligence, data management, and security, and continuing with that theme. And we're going to talk about these really important threads within digital transformation as it relates to those three areas. Primarily BI and data management. We'll touch on security as well, but it's really focused on analytics and business intelligence for the most part, as well as data management. So we're going to have Ghassan on the show, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we recently hosted our Digital Stratosphere 2022 virtual event. It's 3 days of packed content related to digital transformation best practices, about 16 or 18 different workshops and different speakers that are presenting on different topics, everything you need to know about transformation. The bad news is if you miss that event, the event's over. The live event already happened. But the good news, if you've missed it, or even if you did attend it and you want to see replays or you want to catch the sessions you missed, you can do that now by going to stratosphere2022.com. Go to stratosphere2022.com, register. All you have to do is put in your name and email address, just a few fields. You get immediate access to all the recordings, and the recordings cover everything from digital strategy, software selection, organizational change, process improvement, architecture, data migration, cloud, trends in the industry, how to avoid failure, some of the legal aspects to think about, contractual aspects to think about as it relates to your transformation. All that is stuff that you'll get by registering for Stratosphere 2022 replay. And again, go to stratosphere2022.com and you can listen to all the replays of all the workshops that you might have missed at the event. So hope you check it out, and thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Cheatham. You can find new episodes of our podcast every Wednesday on all the audio podcast platforms that you might be listening on, as well as YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as well. So be sure to check us out and subscribe and listen to past episodes as well. I'm excited for our next guest. Gassan Kabara is going to be on the show talking about business intelligence, data management, and security. And Ghassan is someone who has been a presenter at our past online Stratosphere events. He's a CIO advisor. He's someone that engages very regularly in our podcasts and live streams. You may have seen his chat questions and chat comments in the live feeds as we do these sorts of podcasts and live streams. And we thought it'd be great to have him on the show and really pick his brain a little bit about a specific topic. In fact, we had trouble honing in on a topic because there's so many different things that he is passionate about and knows a lot about. But where we landed was really on business intelligence, data management, security, and really focusing on the whole analytical data, BI reporting piece of things. It's one of those underrated work streams within digital transformation, oftentimes an afterthought. Too often organizations get so focused on deploying great new tools and technologies, but they forget about the guts behind it, which is oftentimes the data and the BI and the reports that you get out of those systems. And really, organizations that are doing this right are viewing BI and data as assets that can add a lot of value, and it doesn't show up on your balance sheet. It's not something that you necessarily have as IP or something that shows up on your balance sheet, but it absolutely can create a competitive advantage for organizations that do it right. So we thought we'd have Ghassan on to talk about some of those threads and really how to bake these work streams or these important critical success factors into your digital transformation. So all that being said, Ghassan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric, for having me, first of all, on your podcast. When I woke up this morning, I checked the LinkedIn post, your post, and I found out I was your guest. And then I looked at the title, and then I said to myself, my goodness, I have to catch up on the BI and governance. So I've been working the last 6 hours, recapping. But, before someone does an exam, and you study for it, you just tend to get a brain lock, and hopefully I won't. Anyway, again,
I guess it's better late than never that you realize you were going to be a guest on the show here today, because you're always on the live stream contributing, asking questions. So it's probably good. I guess I forgot to tell you that you were going to be a guest. So thank you for rolling with it.
Anyway, thanks, Eric. Okay, a bit about me. I graduated from Northeastern University, Boston, a great city, many years ago. I'm an electrical engineer and moved into IT. I worked in IT as a hardware engineer and then moved to the soft side of it. And because I liked the term of systems analyst, I don't know, at that time, when I graduated, systems analyst was fun. It seemed to me, when you used to conduct studies. So I worked in it with a company that does in-house software development, and my role was to go to clients and conduct their fact-finding exercises. And of course, we would be selling them systems. I also worked, I do a lot of freelance jobs in my career, and where I've done audits to IT departments and reviewed and evaluated their systems. That's alongside with the jobs that I have held as being an IT manager. And on the ERP side, I worked with ERP systems from releasing RFPs to implementing ERPs, Eric. And what I liked about it was the implementing is great, but the business intelligence side that actually got me into it. And because I was kind of a data junkie, I learned about this word data junkie a few weeks ago. That a colleague of mine told me, "Hey, Gus, why don't you go and take the CISA exam? It's a certified, and what auditors certification." And I took the CISA about 20 years ago, and I like data, and I believe data speaks to me, and that's why we're talking a bit today about business intelligence.
Right. Well, and it's such an important topic. In addition to being an interest of yours, it's becoming increasingly important, in my opinion, just because data is something that organizations have accumulated over decades of having different multiple system migrations, and they've sort of brought a lot of that data with them for better or for worse, whether it's clean or not. And now, though, it seems like organizations are sitting on these large, high value commodity types of things, which is data and the information behind it. But yet a lot of organizations still haven't figured out how to really maximize the value of data and BI in general. But maybe just to back up, why do you think, first of all, what is business intelligence, and why do you think it's so important to digital transformations in general?
Okay, great question, Eric. Let me start with a little story, if you're patient, before I answer this question, because maybe
Sure.
the story will say something. Many years ago, I was hired to come into a company and restructure their IT setup. And I think it was the first week I was sitting in the office with the managing director, and someone knocks the door and comes in and goes to the MD and tells him, and there's a discussion there. Apparently it was the rental manager, it was a car dealership, so the rental manager wanted to see the director urgently. So there was a discussion going on, while I was sitting drinking my coffee, and then the guy left, the manager left. So I asked the managing director, "What's this about?" And he said, "We just have one of our customers who rents fleet. Apparently he was asking for a discount, and they did not give him the discount he wanted. They gave him a partial discount." So I said, "Oh, great." Anyway, as I went back, I decided to do a bit of analytics on this customer, and then after a week, during that time, I found out that we had lost this customer who was with the company for many years, because he didn't get the discount he wanted, Eric. So I went and I called the MD. I said, "I'd like to show you something." So I did a presentation. I called him in and I said, "Let me just tell you something. When you conduct the Pareto analysis, Eric, where you have 20% of the 80, give you 80% of something." So I told him, this customer that I think we lost was on your top 5% out of the 6,000 customers we have. He was the top 5% in terms of revenue. How on earth could you let this guy go? Because to get people to reach that stage, it costs a lot. So he said, "Wow, it wasn't explained to him in that manner." Then I said, "It's not over. Also, they used to come into service and they used to bring in your cars and you used to get revenue out of that." And he wanted to pick up the phone and speak to the finance manager. I said, "I'm not finished." And he said, "Is there anything else?" I said, "Yes. Every year we tend to defleet the cars and we get revenue from reselling the rental cars that are defleeted into used cars." So I showed him a big number in the last 10 years. And honest to goodness, Eric, he was dumbstruck. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, apparently the rental manager, and at that time, they did not give him the information, the whole, what we can say, 360-degree view for him to make the decision. Maybe he was hasty on making it. Maybe he didn't have enough time. So this brings me onto the issue of about business intelligence. If you look at the life cycle of a decision making, like you have 2 days to make a decision, and this was valid 10 years ago. Maybe it's still valid now, and maybe, I hope it will improve. But a lot of time is spent on gathering the information, okay? And then you have little time to make a decision. And maybe this was the case. They did not have, especially when you're getting it from different systems, and you can't press a button and get the report. You have to go back to IT, and you have to, get them to run reports and get them from different systems. So that's why business intelligence, okay, needs to be able to be at the fingertips of those decision makers, so they can get the information and make the decision at the right time. And that's one. And of course, nowadays, we used to have data warehouses. We still have them, and I think the whole objective of these data warehouses is to enable those knowledge workers to actually get reports or intelligence without asking IT. But that story still sinks in my head. It was over 20 years ago, because I really, honest to goodness, when the MD saw the numbers, although he knows the customer, he was just completely dumbstruck.
Yeah, there's definite value there and definite ROI if that person, or in that example or story you told, if they had the right information at the right time. You have to wonder, what is the ROI on that investment they could have made in better information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, and I think you've already somewhat answered this, but when you think about a digital transformation, then just an organization that's going through a transformation, a lot of times they think about, let's figure out how we can replace our old legacy systems and get rid of that technical debt. We think about, how can we be more efficient, to give people tools to make them more efficient. But a lot of times business intelligence and the analytics behind it isn't top of mind for organizations. But why should it be? Or why is business intelligence so important to digital transformations in general?
Eric, at the end of the day, it's all about data. Whether you have an ERP system or any system, you're working with transactional data. People are using these systems to operate, to generate invoices and to do the operational functions. But at the same time, all this data is eventually used for information. Okay, I mean, data. When you get information, you get knowledge, and that's what it's all about. So, in a digital transformation project, you need to make sure that let's say you're migrating from an old system to an ERP. You want to make sure that your data is clean. I've seen a lot, and I've heard, and I've seen, and been involved in a lot of cases where data was migrated to speed up the implementation, and there was no thorough cleaning, where the master data had suffered. Like, you would see duplications of customers' data or suppliers' data. So to get into an ERP system coming from a legacy, you need to make sure data is absolutely clean and migrated. Now, once you're in the ERP, you need to now start applying the data governance concepts, which a lot of companies, I don't think they have this the opportunity to have a data officer, but there definitely needs to be a formal procedure, okay, to for the organizations as the data is being inputted after post go live. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out, and we're back to the old problem where the MDs can't make a decision, because not only could they access the data, but the data was not accurate.
Right.
And to add in that, now in times of artificial intelligence, you talk a lot about this topic on your podcast, and it's an emerging technology. Artificial intelligence, at the end of the day, is relying on the data, Eric. Okay, You've got the machine language chunking the data, looking at the data. So can you imagine if the data that this automation AI is accessing is inaccurate? Therefore, what forecasts or what decisions will it make on your behalf? So data is the heart, and that's the key, to everything. Even as I speak to you now, our voice, our data is going somewhere out, I don't know, to the universe. Maybe if you go at the speed of light and catch up, you can, find out what you've said. So
right.
it's all about the internet. The internet's just one big data lake.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're here with Gassan Kabara talking about business intelligence, data management, and security. We have a lot more to dive into, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. We're here with Gassan Kabara talking about everything related to business intelligence, data management, and security. A question I wanted to get to here, Ghassan, it's sort of it's backing up to a really big picture sort of question, I like this question a lot, and it maybe sets the context for other discussion as we sort of get back maybe into the technicalities of business intelligence and data. But this is from Eduardo on YouTube, and he asks, could you explain what's paper about enterprise culture when we talk about data and digital transformation? And the reason I'm actually going to maybe reframe the question a bit, just to maybe clarify what I think the question's asking. But I guess I want to ask about the culture. When you think about the culture of data and a culture of business intelligence, a culture of analytics and using information that maybe you didn't have before, how have you seen organizations not just put the tools in place, which is one part of the equation, but the other part of the equation is how do you build that culture that learns to make better use of business intelligence and data and analytics? What have you seen? What are some of your thoughts there?
All right. Thank you for the question. That's a tricky question, by the way. Many years ago, when I worked for an organization, and we had a system, and we wanted to and IT was in charge of doing all the reporting. We wanted to offload IT and put it in the hands of the end users, which is what the whole point of getting a BI system. So we invested at that time in a software that was out called Business Objects, and now it's been purchased by SAP. So we got Business Objects into the organization, Eric, and we created a data warehouse. And it took a lot of maintenance to create the data warehouse, and eventually to extract the data from the different multiple systems that we had into the warehouse. This was done in hope that we would give it to the end user, so the end user would have the luxury of actually running the queries. In all honesty, we suffered a lot, even though they were trained. For some reason, they would always come back to IT and ask them to run the queries for them. And so we failed from that aspect. Now, why we failed, I really can't remember, but I think it had to do with the culture. The fact that the company was over 50 years old. They were used to, asking for IT for support and for reporting. And probably the average age of the end user was 40 or something, and so it was kind of tricky to get to push the data BI tool completely to the end users, and they had to come back to us again. And another reason they would use saying, the data is not in real time, you need to synchronize it for us. It's 1 week old, what have you. But this is the hands-on experience that I had with a business, intelligence project.
Yeah. So I think it's just an important reminder that you don't just put the tools in place. You also have to enable people to really understand what they're doing with that information and what they're doing with business intelligence. And also, you mentioned a moment ago, data governance too. And maybe we could just dive into that for a moment. But as far as when you think about, and I know we're kind of jumping all over the place because this is such a broad topic, it's hard to have a real sequential conversation about this kind of stuff. But when you think about data, master data management, and the governance behind data, what are some of the things that you've seen work from that perspective to ensure that you're not only, let's assume that the data you bring over to the new system or new systems is clean, and that's a whole nother topic, which we want to get to, which is, I mean, that's usually not the case. Usually the data that comes over is not clean if you don't handle the data migration right. But let's assume it is clean for a moment and start with data governance. How do you ensure that you have that master data management, data governance in place to ensure that the data stays clean and that the information you're getting out of the business intelligence tools are actually accurate?
Okay, again, a quick story. When I was evaluating an ERP system, I remember I did a site visit to a customer that had the potential ERP wanted to purchase. And when I got there, it was a manufacturing company. And one of the questions I asked the team who had purchased the ERP, remember we were evaluating the ERP, so we did a site visit, Eric. So I said, why did you purchase this ERP? And I remember the CFO, he told me, he said, Ghassan, we found that there's a feature in this ERP whereby the user can create the parts master data on the fly. And it speeds up the process of having to create the master, parts catalog. And I said, that was your main reason? He said, yes. I said, oh, okay. And then, we continued. Now, I wanted to follow up with him to find out what happened. And maybe a year down the line, I did give him a call and I said, remember, we came to your office, we evaluated the system. How's it going with the ERP and your master data? And he just shook his head. Okay. He told me, Ghassan, we're having problems with the part catalog. A lot of users are creating non-parts. So what he thought was a good feature in the ERP and why he chose it, okay, to speed up the process, actually backfired on him and created a lot of garbage into the system. Okay, so again, that's why I believe in having master data controls and procedures in place, because at the end of the day, the parts catalog or the customer names or the supplier's details, there has to be a formal procedure, and that's got to do with data governance. And it's a big topic, this data governance, Eric, but at the end of the day, I think for it to be successful, there has to be ownership by the end users. IT, they're not the owners of the data. They're only the custodians of the data. There has to be transparency. There has to be buy-in by the end users and trust. And you got to standardize the procedures and processes. This is very important. As we embark on an ERP, it's very important to address this governance, who's responsible for what, and actually add the roles and responsibilities of those people responsible to input the master data and add this to their job description as well, because this is for them now, and for their replacement, the new user who comes in needs to know that he's going to be accountable if he gives you a wrong parts master or a wrong customer number or what have you. So it's a very important topic, data governance, and it's really big. And again, it starts with garbage in and garbage out. We keep saying, and I think you need to have continuous audit. As an auditor myself, I used to conduct audits, and I used to come up with a lot of discrepancies and always used to try and raise red flags. But there has to be a subdivision that, or a person, maybe you call him the data officer or what have you, to continuously go inside and look at master data, take it out, look at it from different angles, conduct a few pivots here and there, and make presentations. I think for the first year of the ERP implementation, doing this once every month is not too much, Eric.
Right.
Otherwise, it will just accumulate on you, and then, it'll be too late, and the people will go. And then when you tell them, come, let's fix the data, because I've heard stories where companies who wanted to build a data warehouse have spent over a year and a half to clean the data because they were getting bad results. And there's a lot of those case studies online.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like in today's day and age, the trends toward agile deployments and decentralized decision making and flexibility in enterprise technologies, those are all generally viewed as positives in the space. But I do see that as a potential problem when it comes to data management, because they kind of run counter to, a more structured, centralized, standardized way of protecting this asset, which is data. And just maybe back up for a moment and just think through how the average person might corrupt data or might unintentionally create problems. I mean, there's a thousand different ways that any organization might experience someone going in and changing a product master or a customer master, or entering a transaction wrong. They just aren't trained properly on how to enter a transaction, so therefore the data isn't accurate. So there's all these thousands or millions of different touch points through an organization that can have the potential to corrupt and undermine data integrity if you don't have these processes and audits in place. Is that something you've seen in your career?
Oh yeah. You've touched on an important point here. Always in an organization, you've got two types of flows. Actually, there's three flows in the supply chain, but one flow is how the logical data is flowing in the system, and then the physical flow of how the physical entities are flowing. And sometimes I have seen where sometimes like if you're issuing a part into a service to install this part on a car, I have seen cases where the part has been installed, the car has left the service center, and still the part has not been issued from the parts inventory to the service, to the job card, to the invoices. So there's always the physical flow tends to be faster than the logical flow, and this tells you a lot. This tells you maybe the lack of understanding of how to extract the data. The users could not be trained well, or maybe there are too many controls in place that are prohibiting the user to actually feed the information. But at the end of the day, the customer needs his vehicle, and we need to deliver it to him. So I always used to see a bucket full of a backlog of invoices or cards that need to be fed into the system. And it does happen. Yeah, the objective is to make both these flows work in harmony and in sync together. Otherwise, if one of them is leading, and normally it's the physical, then you have a problem with the process. You need to review it.
Yeah, and it gets back to the question about culture. How you create that culture of data management and business intelligence. It's sort of like that question or that thread, because it's not something that you can set aside as its own separate work stream. A lot of times people view data management as a technical thing that's over here on the side, and the techies are going to handle that. They're going to cleanse the data. They're going to migrate it. They're going to map it. But the reality is everyone's touching and contributing to the data integrity or lack thereof, and everyone's contributing to the data integrity and the use of business intelligence and the ability to think like a smart organization that has access to that data. So, day-to-day processes and sub-processes and day-to-day decisions and things that people do in the system is, in many cases, unintentionally affecting or impacting the quality of the data.
You touched, Eric, I think what I touched a bit on the job descriptions. Yes, a lot of, and the moment you talk technology, the end users the casual end users tend to throw everything at IT. I think one of the mistakes that we have made is, first of all, digital transformation project is not an IT project, and we all know that. But to make it a people project, the job description of all the end users that are using the ERP need to be changed, and these need to be shared with the end users, because if you don't put that on their JD, and you may implement an ERP as they're working, their JD said 1 2 3 4, but now they've got additional work on the ERP that has to go into the JD, and the HR have to feed it, and this has to come back. And I think the more we add the roles and of these users that have a key role in master data, the power users, the more we add their roles in their job description, the more you will minimize the risk of having wrong data entry or people not understanding what roles they are, and you can hold them accountable. So it's really a people thing, because we can train someone and then he'll go away and say, hey, it's not part of my job to do this. Let IT clean the data. Then IT will come and say, hey, we're the data custodians, man. It's not our job. And then,
Right.
you have meetings and then you're fighting. Then if you call a third party, then it's a disaster.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You get a lot of cooks in the kitchen at that point. Everyone's kind of pointing fingers at each other, not knowing who's really responsible for the data integrity here.
Yeah, especially now in times of artificial intelligence, we go back on that, and because that needs a good, sound, clear data, and data in the forms of structured data, whether it's in an ERP or on emails that is unstructured, or even video data, or even some companies actually keep recordings of the discussions they have online. They convert that into data. So data is everywhere in the organization. So how you can make use out of that, that's a big challenge. And the reason I'm saying that, because I just finished a course called Google Data Analytics a couple of months ago. I got bored. I wanted to refresh myself. It was an interesting course, and takes you from the whole life cycle, of how to look at data and the tools to use. And maybe that's what someone who wants to get into this field should look into. But there's a lot of cleaning that is involved, and a lot of bias that is involved, if
Right.
if you don't sit and filter that out.
Right. Now you just touched on a question here from the audience. This is from Kyler, our podcast host here on LinkedIn. And she asked a really good question. And the reason I wanted to bring this up in the context of what you just said is you were talking about recorded phone conversations, like a customer service rep whose phone calls might be recorded and stored somewhere. And that's actual data that can be used in some way. But it brings up the question in my mind that's consistent with what Kyler is asking here, which is, what are your thoughts on data lakes and interoperability? In particular, I want to focus on data lakes, the data lake part of this. But she asks, is that the future of master data management? So let's maybe back up a little bit and just talk about a data lake in general. What is a data lake, and how is that different from like a data warehouse within the world of data management?
That's a good question, Kyler. Thank you. To be honest, I don't know the difference, but I would look at the internet as one big data lake, the internet, where
Right.
you don't need bait to actually take data. You can throw your hook into this internet, the big data lake of internet, and take information. I'm not talking about the bad information, but I have not worked and done a lot of research on data lakes, so forgive me if I can't answer that. But
Sure.
but definitely, it could be. If let me guess here, maybe it's a bunch of data, a farm of data warehouses all together, maybe forming a lake. I don't know, maybe, and where definitely the master data, has to be clean and has to be reliable, because you're digging the information from this lake in order to make a decision, and
Right.
if you get the wrong information, you're going to make a bad decision. And at the end of the day, although the accountants say cash is king, information is king in this day and age.
Right. Yeah, and I think a way to think about it too is data lake is a way to capture structured and unstructured data. So you have, historically, when you think of data, I think we typically think of things like what some of the things that we've talked about so far, like a product master. It's a numeric or a quantitative value that's assigned. It's very easy to search. It's very structured. You have a customer ID or a customer master. You have a transaction like Ghassan bought product A, B, and C. That's quantitative structured data that's very clear and relatively easy to compile and aggregate. But data lake would be something that's less structured, like you mentioned customer service rep phone calls that's recorded and stored somewhere. That's not really structured. It's not something you can search, that has a quantitative value or anything like that. So there's meaning to it if you can capture it and aggregate it. Another example would be social media. A lot of organizations will look at social media and try and capture the information of what people are saying about their products or what the feedback is from customers within the public eye. That's not your traditional structured data, but a data lake could capture that information and give you a tool to sort of analyze and aggregate it. And then you start getting into things like artificial intelligence, machine learning that can start to learn what the patterns are within that data. So that's really what data lake is the use of that, or the addition of that unstructured data as well as the structured.
Yeah, thanks for the insight, Eric. That was a great clarification for me. Well, as long as the lake isn't frozen, and
Right.
and data flows, because data needs, the big data concept where it's got the three V's. What is it? Velocity and variety, and I forgot the third one. And absolutely, unstructured data is this biggest concern. How do organizations extract this little percentage of meaningful data from this data lake that makes sense for them to make any informed decision? And I think that's where AI is going to come into the picture. I yet have to see people who analyze stock market trends, for someone to come and say, this stock is going to go up, purchase it. Because if anyone has discovered this magic formula, then, well, if I have discovered it, I would not sell it.
Right.
If I can predict the next stock, but so be wary from these people who say, I can predict your next stock market, and this is a great tool for you, because AI uses historic data. There's a lot of chaos theory in the future that no one can predict, and the probability of that's another story.
Right. Might be a whole nother topic for another a podcast interview for sure. We're here with Gassan Kabara talking about business intelligence, data management, and security. We have a lot more to dive into, but first we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing landscape of digital transformation? Then you need our newly released 2023 Digital Transformation Report. This comprehensive report covers the latest trends, technologies, and strategies to ensure your digital transformation is optimized for success. The 2023 Digital Transformation Report is packed full of proven methodologies and insights from experts in the independent digital transformation field. You'll also receive practical insights on how to implement digital transformation strategies within your unique organization. This free report is available for download on our website at thirdstage-consulting.com under our Thought Leadership section.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. We're here with Gassan Kabara talking about everything related to business intelligence, data management, and security. Now, here's a question from Patricia on LinkedIn, and I love this question because it's given me an excuse to tie this all back to change management, to organizational change management, and I was just dying for a reason to do so, and Patricia just gave me an easy out here. And her question is, I'm hearing something interesting. All in an organization are responsible for data, and this should be clear in job descriptions. And I think that's a really astute point, or a very good point, as far as just the recognition that in order for this all to work, all this stuff we're talking about, data management and business intelligence and analytics and all that good stuff, we have to have everyone in the organization aligned and focused on it. It can't just be an IT thing like you mentioned, Ghassan. It has to be something that is baked into job roles, expectations, training, the process definition, all that stuff. And that's something that oftentimes gets overlooked because we get so myopically focused on just deploying the tools without thinking about how are we going to use those tools and make sure that we're not undermining the value of the data and the BI that's behind it.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me back up maybe even further in the, we've talked a lot about how processes can impact BI and data and how, the master data governance and master data management is so important once you have the data in place. But let's back up even more and think about an organization that's just trying to get onto a new system and they realize that their data is corrupt, or maybe not corrupt, but it's not accurate. Over the years, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts because so many people have touched and corrupted the data or done something wrong in a transaction that has created dirty data. What are some of the high-level best practices that organizations can follow to start to migrate their data, to cleanse and migrate their data in a way that purifies some of those problems that's been created in the data over the years?
Okay, sometimes this has to do with data migration. it's important that we get clean data into the ERP before we go live. Otherwise, as you said, once it's in the ERP, everyone's focused on using the system, and no one will take responsibility, ownership to clean the data, because that was a problem that was foreseen earlier on. So I think data migration for ERP, it should be a project that should be given the attention it deserves. Okay, and this should be discussed earlier on, really earlier on in the ERP, and a dedicated team should be working on it. And because at the end of the day, wherever you're getting the data, it's easy for a company that has no data to start from scratch on the ERP versus a company that's got data in different systems on Excels or other legacy systems to actually take the data and bring it into the ERP. Because what needs to be done here is you need to have lots of iterations of data cleansing exercises, okay, before you decide this is going to be the cutoff to move into the ERP. And that you will find a lot of resistance in this exercise, Eric, because people are doing the day jobs, and some of them are working on the ERP projects, and now you're coming also telling them, we need you to focus a lot on the data, on the cleansing of the data. And if you find a duplication or what have you, which one should I take in, which one should I delete? So there's a lot of back and forth going on. So I believe, in all honesty, I would say a data migration project or a data cleansing project should be done way before you start an ERP. Try and clean it in the legacy system if possible, okay? Because once you've done 60% or 70% of that on the legacy system, then you've got 30% to worry about when you migrate. But if you're going to wait till the big bang and add it as a 2-week or 3-week project, pre-ERP live, then believe me, due to the pressure that everyone is working on to meet the deadline of ERP, you'll have some people ignore this issue. And let me give you an example. This is 3 examples that have happened due to this mishap. When you have in finance, you have in the general ledger, you have a control account, and a control account in the general ledger controls the values of all the transactions in the subsidiary ledgers. They should match. So in a GL, you may have a receivables control account that should match all the receivables. Now, I have come in 3 different projects, when we have migrated data or I have been involved to come and audit, I have noticed that the control account does not match the subsidiary ledgers. So something is wrong here. So then you have to work on a project and audit and analyze to find out what invoice is not in there, what happened. And I've seen this 3 times in the last 15 years, believe it or not, due to this fact that data was not cleansed. Right. And that's hitting the balance sheet.
Yeah, and there's a direct financial impact there, and that's the low hanging fruit, if you will, the high value low hanging fruit when it comes to data. You also have all the other secondary or other processes and impacts to data that aren't necessarily directly financially related, but they can certainly impact and undermine your ability to make good decisions. Here's another question from Kyler that I think is really interesting, and it's actually one I hadn't really thought of. But that is, what are some nuances of digital migration to a cloud system that organizations should consider, particularly when it relates to data? Is there anything that's unique about migrating data to the cloud as opposed to other, on-premise systems and things of that nature?
Kyler, that's funny. I've only worked with one cloud system. One of the biggest nuisances I had was I could not migrate the data online in time to bring it to the cloud. I had to actually put the database in a tape and DHL it to Amazon for them to upload it to the cloud, because the internet bandwidth, and at that time it would take 2-3 days for us to migrate the gigabytes or terabytes that we had. So that's one of the problems. It's putting the data on the cloud, as you're moving to the cloud. So unless you really have great speed and you can figure out how to segment your data, then just go to the data center and give them the tape and let them bring it into the system. Otherwise, uh, I can't see anything, any other nuisance other than that. But once it's on the cloud, then your backing up procedures is on the cloud. Again, if you decide to bring something back down to premise as a backup, that's going to cause you another problem. Once you're on the cloud, you're on the cloud with your data, and good luck.
Right. Well, and that actually leads to another question, which I don't have a good answer for this, so I won't blame you if you don't either, Ghassan, and maybe the audience does if you or I can't answer this question. But I do wonder more recently in recent years what happens when I'm already in the cloud. Let's say I already figured that stuff out. I figured out how to get my data into the cloud. I'm on a cloud or a SaaS based ERP system, let's just say. And 10 years from now, I decide, you know what? I've outgrown the system now. I want to move to another cloud system. How hard is it for me to get the data out of the cloud system that I'm using now and into another cloud system? In other words, is that switching cost or that barrier to moving data, is that going to be higher than it was when I was on-prem and I could just, I owned the software, so it was easier for me to get the data in and out of there? Do you think that will be an issue in the future, or what are your thoughts there?
No, I think it won't be. I don't think it will be more difficult than taking it from premise to the cloud, because now I'm just thinking, in a physical domain where I'm on the cloud, I'm at the same level. Here I have a cloud system. Here I have another cloud system. Of course, we know they're all on planet Earth and nothing is flying above us.
Right.
But the
Not
thing
yet.
is, yeah, not yet. But I think is these cloud service providers tend to have open doors. You can call them APIs or connectivities between each other to allow for such data migration activities. And as long as you can find good highways on the internet to transfer, some of them may have dedicated VPNs to transfer the data and what have you. I think it would be easier, what I'm trying to say, than from premise to the cloud, than moving. Of course, the only problem with that is if you think you've taken your data from your old provider, he ain't going to get rid of it. If he says he has, don't believe him. He's still got your data in some backup somewhere. Okay, it's there forever. So that's the problem with data. And then you can make copies of it, and as you make a copy, it doesn't get worse. The same copy is equally the same as the first copy. It's not like a photocopy of a photocopy. Eventually,
Right.
the quality disappears. So once you've got data on a cloud, but definitely, I was reading an article the other day, and some companies were trying to say, should I go multi-cloud or stay on one cloud? And they were talking about the same topic, what you're talking about, and the challenges.
Right. Now, you sort of triggered another thread, something really important we haven't talked about so far, which actually was something you said, Ghassan, but also a comment here from Ryan, who is part of the Third Stage team, and he posted an article that we posted on the Third Stage site that's called "Is My Company's Data Safe in the Cloud?" And that there's a link to that in the chat if you want to see that article. But it begs the question of security. And this is a topic we could spend the whole hour just on this one topic. But maybe just at a summary level, what would you say some of the security considerations are when it comes to data that we should be aware of?
Wow, that is an interesting topic. I remember back in the days when the internet came and we had good bandwidth, I told the owner of a company, let's move to the cloud. And he said, no, Gus, I want my server next to me. I don't trust those cloud providers. This was about 12 years ago. I said, okay, I guess you have a point. So, that's why they refuse to go to premise. But when it comes to data security on the cloud or on premise, Eric, we want to talk about cyber attacks here. They're on the rise currently, okay? And as we become more digital, okay, we're accumulating more data, okay? We're accumulating data. It's at an unbelievable rate. And this data becomes attractive to the cyber criminals, okay, who want to steal the data and hold us for ransom, all right? And what's annoying, we worry about data breaches and how to protect ourselves, okay, from the bad guys, the bad actors. Yet we fail. Let me put it in another way. There's no framework so far that says your data should be fully encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you've got password encryption, you've got some other type. But if I go to your database right now, I can take the data and everything is open. So what's ironic is that the hackers that attack your data, whether on the cloud or on premise, they encrypt it and then they hold you for ransom to give you the decryption key, when it should be the other way around.
Right.
You should have your data encrypted and prevent the hackers from encrypting it further. And I think that's what's lacking in these security standards. They're probably going to shoot me for this, but that's what's lacking in all these ISOs of security. There's a lot of focus on technology, and but there's a little focus on the people aspect and this issue with getting data to be encrypted. I think because we've always had data in a resting place, okay, it's an easy target. I wish there will be one day where data is always on the move to make it a harder target for hackers to reach out, where it's encrypted and it's always moving. And maybe this could be the introduction of the big blockchain data concept. But as long as your data is on a server, you've got these malicious actors aiming to get to your data, and they find the vulnerability, they exploit it, and they've taken your data out. Although you may, back to the question, sorry, I didn't answer it in a way. Although on the cloud, you may think your data is safer and the providers will tell you it's safe and etc. And they have the tools. Just recently, there's been a lot of ransomware on Amazon's data warehouse, the Red River one, or what I think that's what it was called. And so you still need to continue with old hardening the systems and what have you to protect the data. And then who you're going to blame, Eric? Okay, you're getting cyber insurances these days saying they will insure you, but they're not going to negotiate. They won't get your data back. They may be paying the fee, but once the data's out, it's with the hacker. He's not giving it back to you, even though he may decrypt it, and he, but he's still got the data. And even though he may promise he's deleted it.
Yeah, and it's also the other piece of that too is everyone is. Or not everyone, but in the media, a lot of what we see are the big, massive cyber attacks, the outside nefarious actor that hacks a system, steals the data, or does some sort of ransomware initiative. And those are big deals. Those are things definitely to be aware of. But I think what oftentimes flies under the radar that isn't as widely reported on or recognized is the fact that just your own employees are a security risk, not because they are necessarily going to try and steal your data or do something bad intentionally, but because their processes are affecting, just like what we were talking about, data integrity. Day-to-day processes impact data integrity, and day-to-day processes also affect data security. So in other words, if I introduce a third-party app into the organizational ecosystem that taps into the core central ERP system and somehow manipulates that data and uses it for something else, right there's a security vulnerability there because I've introduced a third-party app that now integrates with another system that maybe I've locked that system down and I've tightened it up and now I've introduced another risk. Or there's a business process where I take data from the core system, I download it into a spreadsheet, I manipulate it, and I slice and dice it, or I dump it into a BI tool because I want to get some sort of business intelligence analytics report out of it. And now all of a sudden I've got, potentially data sitting on my local machine or in another app or whatever. I've created these possibilities, all these endless possibilities of how data could be breached or security could be breached. Is that something you've seen as well? Is sort of the unintentional employee data security risks as well?
There's the unintentional employee where he has not been trained enough, and he has not been informed about the security policies on how to manage the data. And again, that's part of data governance. But again, the thing is about the internal. You're talking about internal employees accessing data maliciously. The hackers, the criminal market for hackers these days, they're actually inviting those employees, paying them money to give them the data. Okay, and it's become such a big market. Okay, and they're going to an employee saying, "I'll give you $500,000. Just put this USB on your computer network for me, and and we'll take care of it." So they're buying those employees out. And now, with the introduction of the Great Resignation, I tend to worry a lot about people can go and buy these hackers tools for nothing and start running them. Okay, and this is increasing, Eric, a lot. From that perspective, and of course, yes, definitely, the the what's it called? I lost track of what I wanted to say here
The
about.
great resignation affecting, the vulnerability potentially of
Yeah,
getting
yeah, because,
bought.
yeah. You're going to see less criminals on the street, and they're going to be sitting at home wearing the hoodies, trying to utilize those scripts because you just press the button and you run the script and what have you. And I do conduct from now and then awareness training campaigns, and you'd be surprised how easy you could make someone press on a malicious link, you know.
Mm,
And I keep doing it, and I keep getting people, and I keep training them, but I keep doing it because you have to think like a hacker, and and that's what they do. They're getting very creative these days. And as you said, every time you introduce a new technology, or even if you don't patch up your system, or you make a change, then IT is always being seen as the entity that is the entry point. I mean, if I'm a hacker, or what hackers come and do these days as red team tests, they first try to attack the IT, and they find out if an administrator has his passwords in a spreadsheet, and to save them the hassle from going through firewalls and all the other security appliances. So IT need to be very, very vigilant, and if you're saying, what is it, practice what you preach. I think you got to practice what you preach to the end users. So again, in these times where there's a lot of pressure for securities and CISOs, security officers, they're scratching their heads. I don't think they get enough sleep because they don't know if they're going to wake up the next day and find out if their system is still, safe and sound, or the data is being, in the deep web somewhere. So
right.
security is another domain. It's a big area, but again, the more you introduce emerging technologies, the more you've got areas of vulnerabilities that you're exposing yourself. Okay, and even as the human being, okay, who to people don't write their passwords on notes. No, hardly. You tell them use a vault, and why should I use a vault, etc. But the day you will lose your data, or the day your iPhone is damaged, then
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That
so
creates a risk there
so
as well. All right. That's good stuff. Well, thank you again, Ghassan, for being here. Really appreciate having you on the show. And we're going to debrief and cover a couple of the topics that Ghassan touched on in the interview. But first, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Cheatham. You can find new episodes of our show every Wednesday on audio podcast platforms throughout the world, as well as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So be sure to check us out there. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to have John Heyliger, who's going to be on the show to talk about workforce management and analytics. But before we get to him, Kyler, let's talk about and debrief on some of these threads that Ghassan brought up in our conversation with him. What were some of your thoughts and observations from that interview?
Well, Ghassan's thesis of junk in, junk out, I think really holistically applies to all sort of master data management practices. And I really like the fact that he hones in on that and just showcasing that it might be the most sparkly, genius, efficient technology. However, if you don't have the data not only ready for the migration, but also a governance structure of how it will be maintained and checked, similar to what we kind of talked about with the overall AI and ethics within the casino industry, or with using human behavior points, you have to ensure that those data metrics are monitored, and there is some sort of plan around how do you ensure that your systems are not only operating ethically, but are maximizing the business value that you invest in them. So I think that Ghassan really nails kind of the logistics and the basics around what that looks like. And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of times the digital transformation industry in general can get so excited about a new technology, a new functionality, a new innovation, that we forget just the basics of needing to input clean data in order to get clean results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times you look at these proposed project plans that software vendors put in front of their customers, and a lot of times you've got data that's almost an afterthought. Like, a couple weeks before go live, we're going to start migrating the data over, we're going to cut it over, or do the mass data load shortly before go live, without really giving enough of a chance to not only do data loading and just making sure that the system can handle the transactional volume that's happening, but also that we test the data and that we really understand how the data maps to the new fields and to the new functionality of the software, and that we've really fully vetted through that. So in other words, you don't just want to test during user acceptance testing. You don't just want to test workflows and understand how the software aligns with your technology needs and your business needs, but also how does the data fit into that as well. And too often organizations really skimp on that piece of it. So making sure that you not only have a plan to cleanse the data, map the data to the new system, but also test the data in that user acceptance testing environment is super important as well.
Yeah, that's a great point about testing and the importance of that, and just understanding the overall workload that is data management and migration, especially if you are a smaller to mid-tier organization that's trying to grow up with a lot of disparities in what you've started to build your data on, and kind of having to rectify that is a big process. And we've even seen an emergence in the niche vendor partner marketplace around data management, and that specifically in helping to not only cleanse and optimize data, but to migrate it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think Ghassan, as you said, is such a great thought leader in that space. And I love the way that he can make us all laugh. I think
Yes, he's a funny
he
person.
gives us a funny aspect to what digital transformation is. But highly recommend following him on on LinkedIn specifically, and then he also does some guest blogs for us here at Third Stage as well. Our CIO panel you can find on our YouTube page, where we feature a lot of CIOs from the EMEA area at our Digital Stratosphere conference, and he's featured there as well. So highly recommend engaging with him, asking him questions. He's very active in the social conversation around what is not only the modern CIO and the overall positioning of an IT department in 2023, but also understanding those human impacts, which we know sometimes that can be a bit of a unicorn role.
Yeah, absolutely. He is a very smart person, has a broad background, broad understanding of digital transformation, and he's been in that CIO role, so he's got a pretty unique perspective. So it's always good to have him on the show, and really appreciated his perspective here for sure. And be sure to follow him, because he's constantly not only engaged with our content, but he's constantly putting out articles and just interesting tidbits. I actually read a lot of the stuff he puts out there.
Me too.
And sometimes I'll build on it or reshare it to my network and whatnot. So I find it extremely valuable. So again, his name is Gassan Kabara, and you spell that Ghassan, and Kabbara, I believe, is Kabbara, I believe. Kabbara, I believe is how you spell it. So you can find him on LinkedIn. That's where I follow him. He's probably active elsewhere, but that's where I tend to follow him the most, is on LinkedIn. So great to have him on the show. And speaking of thought leaders, we want to have an additional thought leader on that we actually had on the show in early 2022, earlier this year. as we roll into December here, end of 2022, we're kind of looking back at some of the best interviews and some of the most interesting interviews. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the more overlooked interviews. I don't know why. It's probably because it was partly because it was early in the year that we first published this. Secondly, the podcast has gotten more popular as the year has gone on, and I feel like a lot of people may have missed this interview the first time around. So we thought it'd be worth replaying for you because it's a super interesting topic, super interesting guest. And his name is John Heyliger, who's the VP of Workforce Management and Analytics at Lockheed Martin, which is a big aerospace and defense company based in the United States, very large company. And he's going to talk not really even in the context of aerospace and defense. Most of what we're going to talk about, or what we do talk about in this interview, is related to general workforce management, analytics, as well as human capital management sorts of things. So very relevant, whatever industry or geography you might be in. So we thought we'd play you this clip. But first, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll play you the clip of John Heyliger talking about workforce management analytics. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the 2021 Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us, or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how to take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Kyler Cheatham, and we are posting new episodes of this show every Wednesday on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. So be sure to subscribe to us and check us out there if you haven't already. And we're excited to play you this clip that we first premiered on this podcast in early 2022. We're looking back at some of the best interviews of 2022 so far. And this is one of the ones that we wanted to play for you here today, which is with John Heyliger, who's a VP of Workforce Analytics or Workforce Management and Analytics at Lockheed Martin here in the United States, which is a big aerospace and defense company based in the U.S. where Third Stage is based. And one of the reasons we want to play it for you is because it's continuing with this thread of data analytics and business intelligence and whatnot, but more importantly, it does it in the context of workforce management, which we don't always talk about, and that's an area that doesn't get a lot of attention. So we thought it'd be really interesting to replay this for you. So let's roll the clip with John Heyliger talking about workforce management and analytics.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all the viewers as well. I work for Lockheed Martin, specifically in the space business, and I head up their workforce strategy and analytics function. So topic is very much in my wheelhouse, which Eric, I know is why you had me join. So appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we usually try to line the guests up with the topic they know something about. So I'm glad it worked out to where this happens to be a topic you know a lot about. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a cool topic because I think it's top of mind for a lot of organizations as they deal with, the Great Resignation and just keeping employees engaged in times of uncertainty with the pandemic and everything. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into more of the people, HR, workforce management, analytics side of change and transformation in general. But before we do that, maybe just talk a little bit about what do you do? So you're the director of workforce management and analytics, but what does that mean? Sort of what is your responsibility?
Yeah. So the simplest way to describe it is I'm trying to help our business forecast the skills and talent that they're going to need to deliver on their business strategy. So a lot of that obviously requires pretty heavily analytics, business intelligence, insights into workforce dynamics, external market factors, those kinds of things. There's a pretty significant systems component to my role, and we're deploying a new human capital management system, trying to look at more efficient processes and how we manage our workforce. And then a small part of it is actually on the STEM side. how are we building pathways to get students more interested in considering STEM careers, even if you include sort of art-based STEM, which if we have time, get into. So looking at those grades 6 through 12 earlier career funnels. So I look at workforce as a supply chain, if you will, if you apply it to business and manufacturing. So we're trying to look at it really at that early, like I said, grade 6, even through retirement.
So you're building a long-term funnel of future capital.
Right.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Right. So it's super long-term thinking then, rather than
super long-term. Yeah, it's hard to get your head around when the business, like, I got positions to fill today. How do we get them to think longer term?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So what, I guess just to start and maybe to back up for a second, a lot of our audience is here because they're involved with or interested in something related to digital transformation, business transformation, change management, that sort of thing. But just to maybe simplify the concept of workforce management, what does that mean? Because you focus on this stuff, what is that? How would you describe that in its terms?
Yeah, so there's a strategic component of I have what right skills, right time, right place, right cost does the business need? Then there's the people that you have of, understanding why they join, why they stay, even why they leave. So those are so if you think of that as a high level, there's obviously the legal components of managing the workforce. There's the hearts and minds, the brand, the experiences that you want to give them, and the way in which you give them those experiences that I would include in that.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's a pretty holistic view of HR, and just not even just HR. It's more just people's engagement with the company and identifying that talent even ahead of time.
That's right. What do they fit into the culture? How much discretionary effort are they giving you? Those kinds of things. Are you allowing them to bring their whole selves to work? There's a lot to unpack there, but that's other elements I would add. Yeah.
Now, how has your job shifted, and maybe some of the challenges of your job shifted in the last couple of years, with both the pandemic and also the talk in the trend of sort of that great resignation that a lot of organizations are facing, where there's just a lot of people kind of rethinking their careers and maybe shifting careers, quitting jobs. How has your world changed here in the last couple of years, given that backdrop?
Yeah, so a little context to what I'll share is, the company I work for, we compete across all technology sectors. So the Amazons, the Facebooks, we're in the aerospace and defense industry, but it extends much beyond that. So we compete with banking, we compete with insurance, we compete with your social media companies. And so we are trying to compete in all of those areas. So we're, if you think of this as sort of a battle, we're on all kinds of fronts here, trying to, when we think of workforce management, how are we giving them flexibility? Are we providing more wellness opportunities for them? Flexibility of where they work. We all know that regardless what country you're in, working from home, working remote, being considerate of wellness, family, all the things that they may be experiencing through this pandemic. How far out does that continue? And does that now become the norm? Even if, or hopefully when the pandemic goes away, are those going to still be important to your employees? We believe that will always be important. It just depends on what is the most important at the time. So employee wellness, giving them the flexibility. In many cases, they want more flexibility, even if that means less pay. That could mean part-time work. That means I want to work closer to my parents, and therefore I want to move, and maybe a lower cost of living. And maybe that, I need my spouse and I work for the same company, and we need to manage our lives accordingly, and how much do companies get involved. There's pay equity and fairness. All those factors play into when you look at the great resignation. And in some cases, they're calling it the great upgrade. It's giving people an opportunity to maybe do the same work for more pay, or get opportunities they never would have had before, because the demand for really skills across the board are so high right now, and will be probably for the foreseeable future.
It's interesting. I hadn't heard the term "the Great Upgrade." You always hear the Great Resignation, but I like the positive spin on that and the opportunity that comes with that, both for employees and the employers. Yeah, super interesting. And just actually, before I keep going with my questions here, just a quick recognition of our audience here. You're just looking across the platforms that we're streaming to. We've got a lot of interesting locations people are from. Raphael is on YouTube from Canada. We have a marketing team from Denver, Hasina from Algeria, Mario from Colombia, Ronaldo from Mozambique, where he says it's hot. And interestingly enough, it is not at all hot in Colorado, where John and I are. It's below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's extremely cold right now. In fact, it's too cold. You can't really tell behind me, but it's almost like it's too cold to snow. It's supposed to snow, but it's like it's too cold to snow.
Well, I like. I can't pronounce his name. Is it Ghassan? His call out. This is a unique day. It's February. It's 2/22/22 or 22/2/22.
Yeah, my kids were telling me that this morning, and I meant to mention that at the beginning. So thanks for bringing that up, Ghassan. That February 22/22. That's a unique day. And then I was thinking it's every 11 years we get that, but I guess in 11 years we won't get that.
Right.
333.
Yeah, and you've got some. I'm in the space business, so we know Pluto is as close to Earth, and even in view of the U.S. and parts of the northern hemisphere. And it's been since July 4th, 1776, since that's happened. So
yeah,
very interesting day.
It is interesting, very, very historic. Thanks for everyone for being here, and thanks for dropping in the chat where you're from. Also, Nikhil from India, Zam from India as well, and then Ghassan, who is mentioning the 2/22/22, is from Kuwait. So lots of cool places that everyone's from. Most of them probably warmer than where it is where we are today. And if you have questions too for John or myself along these lines or this topic, feel free to drop it in the chat as well. We'll keep an eye on that and get to your questions as well. You can drop it anytime as we're talking here. But what do you think? You sort of started to allude to this a little bit, but I do want to ask you a little bit more directly just to see if you have anything to add. But what are some of the biggest challenges facing organizations in workforce management in today's day and age? You mentioned the Great Resignation and the Great Upgrade, but what other challenges are organizations facing at the moment?
I think companies are facing whether or not they're willing to compete for some of the compensation packages employees are getting. I think there are companies that can afford it and they're raising the bar. They're throwing equity, they're throwing cash, they're throwing all kinds of things at employees. In some cases, it may not even be pay, it may be flexibility that the company isn't willing or isn't ready to counter with. So, there's companies, there was a Gartner webinar that talked about companies offering every third Friday off, or you can have every Friday afternoon off. Actually, Lockheed Martin provides every Friday off. That level of flexibility and time to have balance back in people's lives, because as they've worked from home, they are now working more hours. We've done studies at our company that the folks working from home, working more hours, might be more burnt out. We're trying to apply analytics to understand burnout and flight risk. How do you help those employees with that kind of balance? So I was hearing a lot of companies struggling with that. Imagine you're a startup and you can't pay the types of salaries that maybe more established companies, larger firms can pay. So you may have to hire less experienced folks. What kind of impact does that have on companies when they may need more experienced folks in startup environments? There's the challenge culturally across countries. I think just about every country across the globe is faced with the same resignation, the same challenges, but you might not be able to move as quickly as other companies, depending on what country you work for or work in. The being able to offboard employees is different. There's obviously the laws attached to some countries, but I think you're pretty much faced with the similar challenges. And I'd be curious from our audience if anything I've mentioned resonates or any different challenges you might be facing that I haven't highlighted. And I'm seeing some questions, so cue me, Eric, when you want to stop and look at those. But
yeah, absolutely. And And good point, John, about if you do have, I'd love to hear from the audience. What are some of the challenges your organization is facing with workforce management? Anything in particular that John said that resonates with you, that's particularly true for you, or maybe things he didn't mention that you're struggling with at the moment? Love to get your feedback there. And speaking of feedback, here's a question or comment from Ghassan on LinkedIn, and he asked the question of: a productive employee in theory means a profitable organization. In your opinion, what are the top 3 traits that make an employee productive? And do you have measures for these? And since you're an analytics guy, maybe you've got some measures as well.
So my team and some others, we've started to adopt. We looked at this pretty significantly. Like, what's getting in our way of doing our best work? So to the productivity question, what we're finding pretty consistently is that number one tension is meetings. We're in too many meetings. They're unproductive. We have too many people joining that don't offer value. It might just get a courtesy invite. So if I look at that question of, traits of a productive employee, they spend their meeting time or their engagement time with the right people pretty consistently. They ask the hard questions. They're willing to say no to meetings. They manage their time pretty religiously. Their deep thinking time is sacred. The time they spent with others is sacred. So meeting productivity, I would say, is one trait. You can measure those. Microsoft Analytics has capability. We're not doing that where I am today, but I know you can manage how much time you're spending in emails, how much time you spend in meetings, how many hours, and you can get weekly reports, and we do pretty consistent retrospectives, or we reflect each month on, if we've applied an experiment of, hey, we're gonna do meetingless weeks during the holidays, or is that helping us free up time to be more productive, more deep thinking, more innovation, those types of things. So you can look at things like less meeting time results in more innovation. There's ways to measure that. We're also looking at burnout. So, we were able to do some through surveys. We actually do pulse surveys. We ask a question each week that relates to burnout, flight risk. And we've done our own analysis around what's the likelihood of folks leaving based on historical attrition statistics. So you can connect all of those in a way that helps to not just identify your top most productive employees, but is that resulting in burnout? So I don't know if that helps Ghassan or not, but it's a good question.
What about, you kind of triggered another thought there in your response, but you talk about people being stressed out. They're in too many meetings, burnout, not enough focus time. And then, I think there's also this dynamic of where it's maybe a little bit more difficult to separate your home life from your personal life if you're working from home, at least for office workers.
Right.
But how do you preserve in these times, with against this backdrop of everything you're talking about, how do you preserve your culture? How do you address culture? Have you guys shifted in the way you've approached that, given where we're at in the world?
Yeah, we've tried. So I've been with where I am today 8 years. Previous companies, similar. Culture has always been the not the elephant in the room, but always the most toughest nut to crack. Defining what we are and what we want to be. Historically, our company in this industry has been very bureaucratic. We take on the culture of our customers. So if you're international, if you're in another country still working in this defense industry, even aviation, those kinds of companies, you're probably faced with all kinds of regulation. Banking, financial industry, same thing. How do you still have to address that, but also give folks the opportunity, the freedom, the autonomy to make decisions, to unblock that work, to look at processes that require multiple approvals, those kinds of things. So I'll be honest, I think we've struggled with that. It has to start at the top. We've had great CEOs since I've been here. Jim Takelet, Marilyn Houston, we're sort of chipping away. Little things like, we don't need a meeting before a meeting, keep your presentations to 3 slides. Little things like that, where people would spend hours and hours and build dozens of slide content to prepare to share a status meeting. No more status meetings, those kinds of things, again, chipping away at that culture of bureaucracy. to give folks the freedom to get work done, to drive trust and autonomy down to the people that are closest to the work. We call it the edges or the fringes that are close to the customer. But, culture is one of those, you have to spend time as a company defining it, and then be very clear and intentional about what you want to be, and then apply some of those practices if your culture is bureaucratic and you want to provide more autonomy, or maybe it's too autonomous and you want to bring controls back, whatever it happens to be. I think that's the most challenging.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you guys are going at Lockheed Martin are going through somewhat of a digital transformation of your own, like a lot of organizations are. Do you address culture as part of your transformation, or is that something that's top of mind for you guys as you think about how do we deploy new technologies? And by the way, how does that affect our culture, and what can we do to bend that culture?
It is. It's very much a part of it. We put a lot of effort and resources around change management. So we follow, the typical model of, and the model's escaping me, it'll come to me in a second. But you apply the ADKAR methodology where you're looking at, how do you get folks through that change curve of resistance, acceptance, adoption, when you think of, okay, your work is going to be more automated. So let's say, great examples in software development where you create a factory of code where people can draw that common code and not have to rewrite it every time. What does that do to the software engineer's job? Or even tracking of inventory, where you're attaching RF or Bluetooth devices so you can track things from your mobile device or your computer without having to walk, the shop floor to put, sticky notes and tags on it. What does that do to that person's work? How do you get them and convince them that work is more fulfilling when they might have been doing it for decades? Those kinds of things. The other thing is, this kind of draws to the system side of moving managers to more self-service. So our culture has been, HR, some of the functions do a lot for a leader. We hold their hand, we do the work for them, moving people, approving certain things to, hire somebody or offboard them. How do we create systems and make them intuitive enough that managers can do that work themselves? So that's a big culture shift of, if they do something once a year, a great example would be opening a job. And if we train them and they forget, how do you build that system so it's got, there's a platform called WalkMe or those types of platforms where they do tool tips and tricks when you're in the tool. So it's tool training when you're in the application, so that every time they're in, they don't need a person to walk them through. They can do it themselves. But a culture in a way that doesn't put so much on them that they have to remember 50 things and not have time to actually manage and lead their people. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I know that's a challenge for us, is shifting to digital transformation, applying self-service capabilities and systems that let them, like they said, do that work themselves.
Yeah. So it's almost like an underlying cultural theme of empowerment, self-sufficiency, whatever you want to call it, to where it's, you're managing your own, you're managing a lot of things that you relied on other people to do for you, like HR, self-service, and that sort of thing. That's right. Very interesting. A couple of other comments I want to hit on here. One is actually from Kyler, who's my podcast co-host, who's listening in the background here. And she said she really likes the Great Upgrade. Jed Hafer talked about this at our recent Stratosphere event. Check it out at stratosphere2022.com. So if you go to that website, which is an event we just hosted a few weeks ago, all about digital transformation, Jed Hafer talks about Great Upgrade, emotional intelligence, a bunch of change management stuff that's really important.
Yeah.
Okay, we're playing you this clip from early 2022 with John Heyliger at Lockheed Martin talking about workforce management analytics. We're going to continue the conversation when we return from a break, but first we'll take that break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we recently hosted our Digital Stratosphere 2022 virtual event. It's 3 days of packed content related to digital transformation best practices, about 16 or 18 different workshops and different speakers that are presenting on different topics, everything you need to know about transformation. The the bad news is if you miss that event, the event's over. The live event already happened. But the good news, if you've missed it, or even if you did attend it and you want to see replays or you want to catch the sessions you missed, you can do that now by going to stratosphere2022.com. Go to stratosphere2022.com, register. All you have to do is put in your name and email address, just a few fields. You get immediate access to all the recordings. And the recordings cover everything from digital strategy, software selection, organizational change, process improvement, architecture, data migration, cloud, trends in the industry, how to avoid failure, some of the legal aspects to think about, contractual aspects to think about as it relates to your transformation. All that is stuff that you'll get by registering for Stratosphere 2022 Replay. And again, go to stratosphere2022.com and you can listen to all the replays of all the workshops that you might have missed at the event. So hope you check it out, and thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Cheatham, and we're playing you a clip of John Heyliger talking about workforce management and analytics. Let's jump back to the interview.
I want to hit this question here from Zam. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Zam, in India over on LinkedIn. The question is, in digital transformation like ERP implementations, we need module consultants and leads to collaborate and work together instead of working at individual verticals. Any thoughts how to create an atmosphere of working together, establishing dialogue? And I apologize, I have to hide the question on the screen to be able to read the rest of it here.
That's okay. I can still see it.
How to establish dialogue between various modules and teams. So I think it's a collaboration question. You know, how do you create that cross-functional focus on the organization and mindset shift? Sort of like the cultural question I just asked, but a little bit more functional and focused on operations. How do you create that culture of collaboration within an organization? Or is that something you've dealt with or seen at Lockheed?
Yeah, I've seen it. We've tried a lot of ways, and I'll highlight a few. And what I struggle with is a great question, by the way. What I struggle with is there's no one way, there's no silver bullet, there's no secret sauce to it. It's you give folks the opportunity and the ways. So it could be things like, okay, we're going to use Slack to collaborate and message each other, or, whatever technology or platform that companies are using or that exists. And then how do you give them the freedom to come up with ideas and apply those ideas? So we've done things like we create communities of practice. We have a new ways of working community where we talk about, what are ways that we're unblocking work, that we're driving decisions down closer to the customer. How do we make decisions? What decisions rights do we give each other? And we're sharing that. And it started as a few folks and has now turned in, we monitor users. I think we started off with 20, and now we have our company's over 100,000. I think we've got close to 3,000 employees on this community, if you will. And we're just sharing practices of, have you tried this? No, try that. We cross-facilitate these sessions with each other. And when I refer to new ways of working, there's a book called Brave New Work. There's another one called Humanocracy that tries to apply these principles and practices of unblocking work and driving autonomy. So, it could be a community of practice. It could be a platform or technology you use. It could be ways that you said empower people to connect is what I would say, but it differs across companies, countries. Some folks may prefer to be in person to do that. We can't do that, or you have to do Zoom, or we may prefer Slack over something else. But are you creating a way for your employees to interact? Is that reinforced and driven through leadership? Are you applying that to how your bonus structure and compensation works? That's one of the things I've learned is you can have a culture and you can say, we want you to behave and do this way. But if it's not reinforced through bonuses, through either compensation or how you measure commitments and objectives each year, it's really hard to drive that mindset shift. So I don't know if I answered the question that well. It kind of depends, but I think getting folks to naturally create their own ways of collaborating is probably the best way I would describe it.
And you hit on some really good points about, when you think about how you want your culture to shift, a lot of times people think, well, the technology is just going to sort of enable that culture of collaboration or of self-service, whatever the case may be. But you also mentioned a couple really important things in passing around. You sort of implied that organizational design, compensation structures, that sort of thing. You have to align everything around what that culture is you're trying to get to. A lot of times I think people think, well, I'll just put in the technology, the self-service technology, and we're going to create this digital mindset in our organization. Well, you have the potential to now that you've got the tool, but you haven't actually enabled that mindset until you've done the things you talk about. Right. Has that been the case you've seen too, is just getting you that full alignment around everything that relates to the people's jobs and their experience at the organization?
It has. I would say too, companies have to define what a leader means in your organization. Historically, our company has been, if you're a good technologist, if you're a good engineer, we're going to promote you into leadership. And that's worked in some cases, other cases it hasn't. Well, what do you expect as a leader? Do you want them to develop and have empathy for their people and develop and grow them? Or do you want just managers who make sure the work gets done? There's a pretty solid line between the two. Managers, leaders. What do you want your company? What do you expect of leaders as a company? And then as you define it, you can apply ways to select, promote, what work you give them, how you employ self-service, what technologies you're going to give them access to, how transparent you want to provide data to them. We've erred on the side of more transparency, so we've set up dashboards and self-service analytics, if you will, so leaders can look at data, make decisions themselves. Well, my attrition's gone up over the last 3 months. What do I do? Or, here's my diversity view of my team in terms of diversity or location or how many work virtual or in the office. So leaders can approach their teams accordingly. Then the next part obviously is how much information and tips and training do you give them to apply things to manage their folks accordingly based on that data.
Gotcha. Interesting. Just out of curiosity, approximately what percentage of employees at Lockheed Martin are office workers or people that have the ability to potentially work from home or work remotely?
Yeah, it depends. We have a pretty significant number of programs that require clearances, so they have to sit in a secured space. Hard for them to work from home. But it varies. I think we had not by choice, but because of the pandemic, we had to change our philosophy pretty significantly overnight. And I know a lot of companies have gone through that. We were up to maybe 30 to 40% at one point, but it varies. It depends on what part of our business, what location, and the role typically. So, we've got, like I said, significant requirements for folks to be in the office because of clearance. But I think we may have been 10% at one point. So we took this huge swing and then maybe we've scaled back a little bit.
Gotcha.
But I don't know specific numbers.
Well, and the reason I asked that is because something that just occurred to me is actually earlier late last week, I had a call that I took from home. We're back in an office, but we still do sort of a hybrid. And I took the call from home, and it was with a manufacturing company. And the guy that I was on the call with showed up in the orange vest, because he'd been out on the factory floor. He came into his office office to take this call. And it just, I don't know why it just now occurred to me 2 years into the pandemic that for a brief moment, I felt like a moment of like not being able to relate, a non-relatable moment, if you will, in that I'm working at home. I have the flexibility and the ability to work from home, but clearly he doesn't. He's a factory guy. He manages a shop floor, and he can't work from home. So I guess my question is, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me to ever ask anyone this question. I've never asked anyone this question, but what do you think it creates any sort of a divide between those who can work from home, and a lot of myself included, we all talk about working from home, right? But I would say an overwhelming majority of the employees in the world do not have the option to even work from home, whether they're manufacturing and services or whatever, or high security types of roles like at Lockheed Martin. Do you think it creates any sort of divide culturally? And if so, how do you navigate that?
It does create a divide. I think because you'll see cases of, my job can now work from home 100%. It didn't before. I don't have to be in a high cost of living. I'm just going to move somewhere else, place I'd always want to live, or I get a chance to go move back home, be with close to my parents, whatever. And then you've got the others, like your example, that doesn't have that capability. They have to work in a shop floor, they work in a secured area, what have you. Even some instances where you still got to travel, it absolutely does create a divide. I don't know if I have the answer for how you manage it, other than just be very clear up front about the expectations of the role, how it might be changing, depending on what kind of environment we're in. You might have to provide incentives to those who have to come in the office and see that not as a perk anymore. So you might have to apply certain, like I said, benefits. But then, there's this movement, and this was captured in this Gartner webinar, about, well, if can I move to a lower cost of living and keep my same pay? It's unfair that you're going to, dock my pay because I'm in a lower cost of living, or someone over there is working from home. I can't. So can I move my job from home? That's pretty constant. And I think you're going to have to be clear with your employees. They're going to have to make their decisions if they stay in their role to pursue something that has more flexibility, or you incentivize them to stay if their role doesn't have that flexibility.
Yeah. What about leadership and, if you assume that there's more upper level management leaders within an organization that do have the flexibility from work from home, as opposed to the frontline employees, where I would argue there's probably a much bigger mix of people that can't work from home. How do you create that credibility, the trust, the general leadership, you know what I mean, behind that when you have this sort of, I'm working from home, I'm showing up in my pajamas potentially on a Zoom call, and you're actually at the office. You have to get up and shower and drive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how do you reconcile that, or is that something you guys have faced, or maybe I'm overthinking the whole thing. I don't know. I tend to do that at
times. I'm the same. I mean, if maybe reframe the question, Eric, are you asking, do leaders have to lead differently depending on those types of situations?
Yeah, that's a better way. That was what I was trying to say. You just said it better.
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, one thing I've learned is if your team is grounded in purpose, and you have to spend time developing what is the purpose of your team, what are the expectations, and then all of that around, that purpose, grounding and purpose should drive how you operate. In other words, a good example for us. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time developing why are we here? What does success look like? What would the business benefit from the work that we're doing? Those kinds of things, and identifying our big rocks. And then we say, okay, let's go. We're all going to go out and trust each other that we're going to deliver on these things. We know each other's roles. We know how we're structured, but this is our purpose. And then we trust when folks work, how they work, to figure that out on their own and share it with each other. So we drive psychological safety of, hey, we have one employee who has family time that starts at 5:30, and she's on the East Coast, and we hold that sacred. I typically don't start my workday until 7:30 because I have obligations in the morning, and I actually carve out deep thinking time. We hold those times sacred, knowing that we're all driving to the same purpose. We know our roles. We're going to work together, and we put that trust in each other. And if that doesn't happen, then maybe we're not hiring the right people. I think that's a culture that a lot of companies have of, I need to see them in their seat working at their desks to know that they're getting work done. I think leaders have to change that perspective. Hire the right people, ground them in purpose, and let them go do their best work. When you treat them like rock stars, they'll actually deliver like rock stars. If you treat them and put controls over them, typically they'll behave accordingly as well.
Yeah. And at times like this, where there's more job openings than there are willing workers, that's a big risk, I would assume. People saying, "Yeah, I don't need to put up with this because there's a million other places I could be working and being treated better."
Right.
So, interesting. So here's a little bit different question that just to shift gears a little bit, maybe to get more to the digital side of things, or the system side of things. But how are enterprise technologies such as human capital and HR systems and predictive analytics impacting how workforces are being managed in the 2020s. You talked earlier about the self-service aspect of it. Are there other examples you have of how HR technologies and just other enterprise technologies, doesn't even need to be HR or HCM necessarily, but how is technology affecting the way people work and the impacts on their jobs?
So great example would be, I love the question for many reasons. One is, I think sometimes we expect technology to solve all of our problems. If you don't first identify how the work gets done and then try to apply it within the technology, I think you probably see more failures and successes. But I would say that one of the things we're seeing from a systems perspective is the platforms you're purchasing, the SAPs, the Workdays, those kind of Oracles, do they have analytics capabilities built in? So when you're spending a lot of money and effort to implement, to make sure that maybe it's intuitive, self-service capable, all those things, but does it have built-in analytics? I think HR systems tend to lag other technologies when it comes to that. A great example might be Salesforce or those kind of applications where it's been so, the way that it informs the business, sales, customer behavior, those kinds of things. I don't know if we can apply those same insights to employees yet. I could be wrong. I'm still learning SAP and others, but I think that's a big factor. If you can nail that, I think you can be pretty successful in leveraging the capabilities of the systems. The other one is AI, cognitive assistance, chatbots, those kinds of things, of taking HR work and automating it. For years, decades, HR has been, their value has been based on, I'm answering an employee's question, I help a leader do this kind of work, versus if we could help the business achieve cultural transformation, strategic workforce planning, and less time on, did I help an employee get a question answered, or do I help a leader complete a task? There are technologies to do that. It's either home built or internally built, or you can buy things off the shelf. Typically ServiceNow, those kinds of things, I think are starting to have those capabilities. But I think that applies to some of the things we said before of self-service. You also have that chatbot capability for leaders. What does that do to employee experience? It might solve for the HR business partner who doesn't have to do that administrative work anymore, but how does that translate to employee experience when it comes to, either a question getting answered or what's my next career move? So I think the advancement of that has a long way to go, but there's some interesting applications that I think companies are testing.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's also, speaking of analytics and the data behind it, it's also capturing, it sounds like with chat bots, that's capturing unstructured data that you theoretically could be using to figure out, people's mindset, or, maybe I'm thinking too far ahead with AI and using unstructured data with AI or machine learning, but more AI, I guess. But, just trying to understand what people's mindsets are, and what, back to your point about stress and burnout and that sort of thing, or morale. You could probably pick up on a lot of signals from that sort of data in the future. But I assume that's getting too far out there, or I don't know, maybe you've seen technology that can do that right now. I don't know.
Well, I can't think of one, but I know there's debate of companies and infringing on privacy. So that's one thing I know, country by country, especially in Europe, the privacy laws are huge. Somewhat in the US, but I know Europe has pretty significant privacy laws of what do companies have access to, employee information, health data, those kinds of things. Technologies that are tracking moods of employees. Employees on factory floors wearing a wearable device that shows where they've been walking. Are they spending their time in the right part of the floor? Do they have to walk an extra 50 feet to get a tool or a part? And what does that do to productivity? You're crossing the line there of, they know too much about how I'm working. They know that I took an 8-minute break instead of a 5-minute break. Even tracking what employees' music they're listening to. And if they're listening to more sad music, that means that they're depressed or burnt out. And if companies have access to that information, can they then target that particular workforce and say, hey, we've got a morale issue? That was actually, I keep referring to this Gartner webinar. They seem to be hitting on all these questions that you have, but there are companies that are talking about that type of capability. I don't know what the audience thinks about that, but that's, it's exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I'd love to hear to the audience here listening live. Love to hear what you think. Is this something that we should be taking more advantage of despite the privacy laws, or should we be more concerned about privacy and maybe back off this whole concept of Big Brother or technology being able to track morale and mood and all that sort of thing? On one hand, I could see how it would be super beneficial to know the reality of what people are thinking or feeling or doing in their jobs, not as long as you're not abusing that to micromanage. But if you can look at the broader trends and say, not just, hey, John's feeling sad. It's not about John. It's about just us as a culture and as an organization. Is the entire organization sad? Then that's another issue. So
that's right.
I don't know. That's I can see the pros and cons of that approach.
Okay, we're playing you this clip from early 2022 with John Heyliger at Lockheed Martin talking about workforce management analytics. We're going to continue the conversation when we return from a break. But first, we'll take that break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Cheatham, and we're playing you a clip of John Heyliger talking about workforce management and analytics. Let's jump back to the interview.
So you've been in this space for a couple decades now or more, similar to maybe just different parallel paths that we've been on over the last couple decades. But what are some of the biggest changes you've seen within HR, workforce management, tech, analytics, all the stuff we're talking about here today?
I'll probably go back to your technology question. What capabilities are being applied to offset historically how work gets done in HR? Mentioned a couple things about how you can you measure workforce morale. I think analytics has become almost a core competency in HR. I think that's the biggest change. Data literacy, if you will. How do I look at data, interpret it in a way to help my client or myself make a decision? And I think that's showing up everywhere, not just in HR, but in other areas of the business. I love the story of the farmer. I can't remember which book I read, the farmer turned data scientist, where they automated how their cows get milked. So they put devices on the cows. Cows decide when they get milked, and they go into a stall and it milks them automatically through robotics. And then the farmer actually measures cow productivity on an iPad. That's probably an extreme case of when we think of HR or other functions of what direction we're going. So I would say data, I would say employee empathy and wellness is going to be a huge change of how businesses, CEOs, CHROs think about workforce management. Talked about, do they get less hours? Do they get more pay? Do they get more flexibility? All those things have to be considered, and probably one thing isn't going to work for your entire workforce. It has to be applied strategically. And I would say the best recommendation for any company is you focus on your critical skills first, the ones that are actually going to be pivotal to whether you achieve your business strategy or not, and differentiate them accordingly. But holistically thinking about what areas of your employee and workforce, early career, maybe you have elements that might be close to retirement, and everything in between might require different things. And so those are some examples of the biggest changes. And I if you would have asked this question 10 years ago, Would we be thinking employee wellness was that important? Probably not. I think social impact, social awareness too, when we think about what happens in the geopolitical space, racial challenges, protesting, vaccines, pandemics, all those things. Leaders, employees, employers, CEOs have to be aware of all that stuff now. Before, maybe half of that was important when you think about, driving productivity.
Yeah, it certainly has, if anything, jumped to the top of the list for a lot of organizations, and just added to the complexities of managing a diverse workforce, a global workforce, all that stuff. I don't know why, but when you're talking about the cows, the farm with the cows, when they decide when they're going to get milked, all I could think about was Animal Farm by George Orwell. We were talking about Big Brother a moment ago. It's like, why is this all come back to Orwell somehow? But that's an interesting concept, though. The whole and it seems doable or reasonable, though. Like the cows could decide, the technology could track all that. But can't help but think of that book as well.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that comment, Eric, is it's funny how companies view themselves. Take a Domino's, take a John Deere. They don't view themselves as, Domino's didn't view themselves as a pizza company. They view themselves as a technology company who happens to sell pizza. John Deere is a technology that happens to sell farming equipment, because now they apply GPS and insights and capability that they hadn't before. Domino's, for those in other countries that, they deliver pizza, and you can see where the pizza is and, being made, baked, and when it's going to be delivered, can be done all online. So a lot of companies are thinking that way, and hence the expectation of the employees and the workforce having to shift, to this automation, to this technology and data, kind of going back to the farmer example.
Yeah. Well, as a parent of two teenage boys, I know you have kids around the same age, but I appreciate that Domino's has digitized themselves so that it makes life easier for us as parents. For sure.
Very true.
So we've got a bunch of questions and comments that have just come in here. I'll share one from Kyler from Third Stage, my co-host and our marketing director. Data is a balance. Trust is often not measurable, which I find that really interesting, because we were talking about whether or not the data privacy should trump the need to potentially use that data to figure out morale issues or whatever. But then what does that do to trust? And you can't measure that. That doesn't show up in your metrics necessarily, or maybe it does. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
There's one way to measure trust, and it's whether people stay or they leave, or how engaged they are. I think if you don't have psychological safety and that the trust doesn't exist, people won't stay. They'll do just enough to get by. They may not be very engaged in meetings, right? They'll all those things. It is hard to measure. I would agree with Kyla for sure, but you see some lagging indicators as a result if the trust isn't there, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, how about, this is an interesting comment from Sandy on YouTube, and Sandy says, as long as all levels of management are being tracked to have a fuller picture of productivity. I think, I don't want to assume, but if I read between the lines of what Sandy, I think might be saying is, don't just measure or track frontline employees. You have to do the same with the management too, and hold everyone accountable. So I guess it's back to that whole, are we just going to measure, like target people? Like John seems like he's sort of unproductive, so I'm going to measure him, but not my peers. What are your thoughts on that?
I love it. I think, if you're a good leader, you won't mind being measured or tracked or held accountable accordingly.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, there's companies that, the whole role of leadership and management is changing, or should have changed already, on how they spend their time. I think we assume, we have 20 people, or we have to have a leader over it. Well, why? There are companies that have these pods that don't have leaders. A leader may naturally arise, but someone's not hired and appointed. They know their purpose, they get their work done accordingly, and they co-create as a team. That's uncomfortable and a little dramatic, I would say, in many traditional companies like Lockheed Martin. I think it would be hard for us to do that. But I think even how you lead and whether or not you even need a leader is a question companies should be asking themselves.
Right. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question, kind of opening another angle on this. This is from Sai on YouTube. He says transformation would definitely shift the jobs to different skill sets. What do you think would be the situation of incumbent individuals? So I think it kind of gets back to the whole great resignation, attrition, new employees coming on, but then how do you manage the incumbents, the people that are sort of the legacy employees, the long tenured employees? Do you manage them differently? What are some of the unique challenges they face?
Yeah, I would say if companies, if you can help them make an informed decision. So if the incumbent's job is changing, or just holistically the company's direction of what they expect, and maybe that person's in a role that isn't changing, but eventually if they're going to stay, they probably have to reconsider what skills, training they would need to stay and be successful. As long as companies, and AT&T did this, where they said, look, this is the direction we're going. These are the jobs that are changing, and they're going to go from A to B. You're going to require these new skills. You might have to have a certain level of coding experience. I think it was GE that required all of their employees to learn to code. Those things need to be shared and very transparent to incumbents, to the employees, so they can then decide, do I want to be a part of this or not? If my job's going to be on an iPad and I'm going to be doing digital manufacturing, I'm not going to be working and whittling parts by hand, am I going to sign up for that? And then let them decide, do they want to stay, or to give them an opportunity and enough awareness that their job's not going away tomorrow, but they can start to think about what's next for them. I think if companies do that well, then not just how you hire, but the folks in your existing workforce. It might be shocking, it might be uncomfortable at first, but at least they can make the appropriate decisions. So the ones that stay know that they're fully bought in. But again, you have to help them make an informed decision about how their jobs change.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it gets back to that clarity, transparency, a lot of the themes you've touched on in the discussion here. So what about, I guess just as, a couple things here. One is I want to share this feedback with you, John, because I think it's nice feedback. Thank you, John. Great points and tips. Thank you for addressing my question. And then thank you, Eric, for selflessly making this difference to people like me who are looking for some ways to outperform better in self-improvements. So thanks for that comment, Sam, on LinkedIn. That's why we do this, is to help people improve their careers. And I always have guests on here that I know I'm going to learn from. So that's the way I view it. Is I want to try and learn in front of a live audience, which can be fun and awkward at times too. So I guess just as a question to maybe sort of bring this all full circle and wrap up the conversation, what advice would you give to organizations as they embark on their, I was originally going to ask you digital transformations, but let's just talk about transformation change in general. What advice would you give to organizations, whether they're going through a digital transformation by choice, whether they're being forced into digital transformation because the economy's changed, the supply chain's a mess, and they need to do something, or they just are trying to manage culture differently, their workforce differently? What just general advice would you leave people with if you had two or three things?
That's a great question.
I know it's very broad.
But. Yeah, forgive the pause. I'm kind of noodling on that one. I would say the reason for that transformation has to be clear. I've read about companies, obviously being a part of Lockheed Martin, very clear on why the change. And yes, it applies a lot to how you do change management, but it's still very important to why. People have to be able to resonate and connect to that. And if they don't, that's okay too. And it could be, hey, we have no choice. Our customers are demanding it. If we want to stay in business, we got to do it. Create the burning platform. Or you say, we're going to help, it could be a message around, we're going to help your careers. This is going to be a way that you can take these skills and capabilities to another employer. We're going to create tours of duty for you to grow. You might be uncomfortable, but in the end, you'll be better off and you'll be more marketable. But at the same time, our business model, the environment we're in, requires us to offer products that can do this. And in order to do that, we've got to do that. So the why is the big one. I think being very clear on your investment and benefits of that change. I have, probably a lot of us have read about the billions and even trillions of wasted money of companies unsuccessfully transforming because they haven't had a clear strategy, a roadmap of what has to happen. or companies have waited so long, they've got to do it all at once because they have no choice. And, all again can drive negative ROIs and those kinds of things. So I think 2 would be just being very clear on your expense and ROI benefits. And then I would say the way in which you engage your workforce, the expectations of leaders in this transformational environment, what does that mean to them, and what does success look like? Maybe starting with leadership. What does transformational leadership mean? I can't remember, someone on the audience called out the leadership manifesto. I think it was Kyler. I think that's a big piece of it, is how do you lead in the future? What does the future of work look like? And because if you have the right leaders, and it starts at the CEO, and you can carry this capability and help your employees through this journey, I think could be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all really good feedback. Those are 3 really good tips. And I like the second one, particularly just the benefits and ROI, tracking the cost, benefits, ROI. Because I think a lot of organizations, especially in cases where they don't have much of a choice because they're being sort of forced by the market into transformation, and or the vendors in many cases are kind of forcing organizations to move to the cloud or whatever the case may be. That's not enough. I mean, that's a good burning platform to your first point about communicating the purpose. So the good news is it creates a burning platform, but if you don't have that clear direction of what it is we want to get out of this on the other side, I think that creates that can create a lot of problems.
All right. Thank you, John. Great conversation, and it was good to hear it a second time. And hopefully the audience enjoyed hearing that perhaps for the first time. So really appreciate you being on the show, although it's been several months now. So thank you for that. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll debrief and touch on a few of the highlights from that discussion. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to Transformation Ground Control.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing landscape of digital transformation? Then you need our newly released 2023 Digital Transformation Report. This comprehensive report covers the latest trends, technologies, and strategies to ensure your digital transformation is optimized for success. The 2023 Digital Transformation Report is packed full of proven methodologies and insights from experts in the independent digital transformation field. You'll also receive practical insights on how to implement digital transformation strategies within your unique organization. This free report is available for download on our website at thirdstage-consulting.com under our Thought Leadership section.
Bad to the bone. Bad to the bone. Bad.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. I'm here with Kyler, and we just had John Heyliger on the show talking about workforce management and analytics. What were some of your takeaways now that we've heard that a second time and a few months have passed since we first had that interview, Kyler?
Well, it's really no coincidence that this is our first one, because it's one of my top 3 favorites. I can't pick a number 1 favorite, but it's right up there. Just because I think it really showcases the value of effectively measuring and analyzing your workforce culture. Not only because that's a great practice to do to continue to build the culture that you want and be able to retain employees and maximize productivity, but for a digital transformation, coming in and having that ability to already create a data profile or a data portfolio around the readiness of your organization to undergo this very expensive and risk heavy project is absolutely critical. And I think it's one of the things that I see when we work with our clients is just our ability, Third Stage's ability to come in and measure the organization, and the surprise that comes from the executive team specifically when they see these workforce management or overall kind of organizational assessment analytics. But having that as a regular maintenance to the organization's overall health, I think is so critical. And as you said in the opening, often overlooked. So that's, one of the reasons this is one of my favorite episodes that we ever did, and is really enlightening around the opportunity of best understanding who you are as an organization through hard metrics.
Yeah, and the larger of an organization you are, and or the more labor intensive you are as an organization, the more movement or um, the more impact that this sort of focus on workforce analytics can have. So I think it's a super interesting angle that a lot of organizations don't even ever think about. So, but if you're a large organization or you're a labor intensive organization, I think it can absolutely have a huge amount of ROI just to be able to focus on some of these analytics as it relates to workforce management.
Yeah, and I think it's no secret the correlation between just the overall recognition of Lockheed Martin in the marketplace as a top tier company to work for, and seeing kind of the behind the scenes view of how much time and intention they put into measuring their overall workforce. I think that it's definitely no mystery why that objective is achieved and why they're able to maintain such loyalty within their company in a very competitive marketplace, because they really do put that overall resource into understanding the employee experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, makes total sense.
Well, great interview, definitely, and stay tuned. This is my favorite time of the year, when we go through our top interviews from 2020, and going back to look at all of the great content we've produced. If you do have ideas of what you'd like to hear in 2023, we always are open and receptive to your feedback and what you want to hear as our audience. So if you do go ahead and drop any of those in the comments throughout the next month as we do our episode reviews, we take those very seriously, aggregate them, and we'll consider them moving into 2023.
Yeah, and we said we have yet to do our top 10 year-end top 10 ranking too as well, which will be forthcoming here as we close out 2022. So we're giving you a preview of that though, and going into your top 3 here to start, and then we'll kind of go into the top 10 as well before the end of the year. But yeah, that's great conversation. I enjoyed that one as well, and that's one of those, in my opinion, one of the sleeper interviews that we did early in the year. I think it was probably January that we published that. January, February.
It was February. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
So
So
pretty
still
early on.
figuring it out, right?
Yeah, and it actually feels like a lot longer than that. So great conversation, and we appreciated having John on. He'd be someone that'd be good to have on again as well. So, well, thank you for that debrief, and thanks for your choice here for your top 3, or one of your top 3. I'll be curious to hear what the other 2 are. You and I haven't discussed it, so I'm curious to hear now. I'll have to wait till next week, I suppose, to find out what your next one is.
Yep.
So look forward to that for sure.
Surprise.
Yep. Good deal. Well, thank you for that. Thank you to everyone for joining here today. Appreciate it, and look forward to reading your chats and some of your feedback from the different streams here. And be sure to check us out every Wednesday on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as audio podcast platforms throughout the world. And be sure to follow us on social media too. You can follow Kyler, myself individually, as well as Third Stage as a company on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, wherever you're on social media, you can probably find us there. So be sure to look for us there. And we're posting stuff daily out there, so be sure to check it out. So thank you again for joining. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you all next week on Transformation Ground Control. Take care. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 96. Let me say that again. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 9. Man, I mess that up every time so far.